All right, looks like everything's getting started smoothly. We've got some people coming in. Welcome, everybody. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started now. Well, welcome to the Builders Blueprint to Recruiting Testers. You will notice two things. One, I am not John Little, and John Little is not here. John Little is stuck in Texas right now, so I am filling in for him. But I assure you, you are in capable hands. I have a pretty decent background in beta testing. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Chris Rader. I'm the VP of Marketing here at CenterCode. My background is in user research and beta testing. I came from a small company called Western Digital that dealt with storage. And I got my start as a technician on the beta team. And really what that meant was I did a lot of the grunt work for beta testing. So I responded to tester feedback. I got products out to testers. I handled anything that had to do with support of the product with the beta team. I also did some manual test cases, so some manual software tests for the products as well. I eventually moved from beta testing into user research. I picked up a lot of books. I was doing 1 to 2 a week just on what user research is and user experience. I eventually went through a nice, hefty, and expensive UX certification, which really got me launched into the field of user research. I started up the team at WD for user research, and I got to test a lot of different products and a lot of different stages. So I was still doing some beta stuff. I was doing user research. I was doing prototype testing and usability studies and remote UX and interviews and surveys, all that fun stuff. So I got to see a lot of things there. And eventually I landed at CenterCode. And while I've been at CenterCode, I started on the marketing team doing research again. I eventually made my move into helping companies. So I'd help manage tests. I'd help onboard new customers. And I also did some consulting with some companies. So over the last 7.5, almost 8 years, I've had this opportunity to go on site, not as much recently, just because the on-site visits went down a little bit. But I got to help a lot of companies spin up their programs and optimize and better their programs. And that's where I think I can help and bring some value into this. So while John Little's not here and he's a great resource, I think I can help you guys out with some of this recruitment stuff. So first, before we start, if you've ever been in one of these, we do a housekeeping session. Real quick, thank you for joining. Really appreciate it. This webinar is being recorded. It's going to be sent out to you after the event is done. We typically send it within a day or two. And if you have any questions, throw them out there. I imagine you're here in the webinar because you have that opportunity to give questions. So please, I want to hear your questions. If you don't have questions in here and you want to keep it to email, feel free to email me. It's chris@centercode.com. Happy to get back to you. A few things before we get rolling. Typically, we give like an introduction to CenterCode. If you're here, I'm sure you've heard a little bit about CenterCode already. But if you haven't, we have launched some new editions of CenterCode. So if you want to check out our new pricing page, just visit centercode.com. You can find the pricing page. It's up in the top navigation bar. Download the new edition guide. It kind of explains what features are in each of the editions, why you might want to upgrade or be in a certain edition. And you can sign up for free. So you can spin up a new implementation or beta site, and you can start testing. It's got some limits and constraints on it, but you can read about those all on the pricing page. Next, join our community. We have actually launched a community. We've been kind of slow rolling it out. So we are sending a newsletter out announcing this to all of our customer base. So if you're a customer and you're on this webinar, join the community, centercode.com/community. There's a link to join our Discord. We've got a lot of great resources in there. You can collaborate with other teams. We've had great turnouts from people like Alex Larson at Trimble and Richard Ball and Jake. And there's just, if you know any of those people, they're some heavy hitters of our customer base. We're in there talking about tips and advice on scaling programs, what to call our programs and all that fun stuff. But you get access to some resources in there. It's just a great place. Someone from Adobe once met at an event they were hosting, and they met all of the customers that are around us, and like, I finally met my tribe. So this is where the tribe is kind of coming together, this community. So join that. You'll have a great time. share with like-minded people. Next, check out our podcast. It's available on everything you can probably imagine, all the streaming services like Pandora, which I didn't know was super podcasty thing, but apparently it is. But on Spotify, on Google Play Store, all Apple Podcast, all that stuff. You can also check out the YouTube. They just launched a new podcast feature, so all the video, all the podcasts are recorded. So we have full videos, we have audio, we got clips set up, we have a full blog if you want to read it, if you prefer that. It's all in there. So check out the podcast. Now I'm going to take a drink of water because I was going pretty hot and heavy there in the beginning. But the other day I was preparing for this webinar, and every night I put my toddler to sleep, and he's a wild man, so I have to sit there and with him to make sure that he goes to sleep. If not, he's just bouncing off the walls all night. So I sit there in the dark on the floor next to him, and he's in his bed. And I think this is like my dojo. Our CEO Luke talks about he gets shower thoughts, or he's driving and he gets thoughts while he's driving. And mine is when I'm sitting there laying down. It's when I do all my best thinking. And typically most of the time that it regards beta testing. So I'm sitting there earlier in the week, and I'm thinking about, okay, what are we gonna talk about? We have a loose idea. It's about recruitment. We understand what the key benefits are and why you need to do it and all that stuff. And I started thinking to myself, okay, what's the best recruitment? What's the best way to get beta testers for your project? And I went down the list. I have all my bullet list in my head. I'm forming this nice blog. It's a brain blog of mine. And I have, okay, here's all the best practices. This is the best way. And then I started thinking, okay, now is this going to apply to everybody? So I thought back to a recent experience. Like I just mentioned, we launched our new editions on Product Hunt, which is, a website that people use to launch their apps and software and all that fun stuff. But I'm going through they have a discussion section of that site. And I type in there beta. I want to see what are people talking about in beta for Product Hunt. And this is people just about to launch their products. So the thing that I started scanning through was that a lot of people were just struggling to find testers. Now, these are new products, right? New products don't have a customer base. A lot of people are just trying to launch, and they're one person teams, and there's not a lot of people on the team for resources. So I'm responding and I'm giving my advice to everybody about, like, hey, here's what a good sign up page looks like. Here's how you find testers. There's different sources and all this great stuff. I felt accomplished because I helped some startups. So, okay, I have that experience. The number one problem was beta testing. I even did this like really cool thing. I've actually exported all the comments from Product Hunt, and I threw in a ChatGPT, and I told it to give me some counts of like what are the most common problems. And yeah, recruitment was the first one, finding testers. And then I thought back again, because I'm just sitting there thinking while I'm putting the toddler to sleep. Our industry survey, Centerco does an industry survey every year to our user base, to people out there that aren't customers, that do beta testing. And I remember our top issues tend to be recruitment, finding testers. That's not the only issue. We asked them to kind of rank their issues, but right up there at the top is finding testers. Well, okay, finding testers, that's a problem. That's why we're doing the webinar. It's all that stuff. And then, like I mentioned, I've done a fair amount of paid consulting and then good faith consulting. So I've done consulting with a lot of companies. And what I thought back to was, it wasn't often that I got the problem of like, I can't find testers. Like if someone's at the point where they're asking for consulting, or they're paying for consulting, or they have investment to the program, and they're relatively a larger team, they don't typically have problems with finding a quantity of testers. So like why the disparity? And I'm struggling with this in my head while I'm laying there. I still have like 40 minutes left in my putting the toddler to sleep, and I'm just staring at the ceiling. And that's when I got hit with it. My epiphany is that when I say what's the best way to do recruitments, you think of best practices. And then what I came to is the best practices don't always apply to everybody. And it's usually more so about the right practices for where you are in your maturity or the right practices for your product or your business or your audience, because those are all things that we would kind of consider things that influence your recruitment. So the best way to find recruitments or find testers is really what's best for you, the right way to do it. So I started formulating this idea. It's like, what's the right way to find testers? And that's what I'll give you an example of, like the best practice that doesn't necessarily fit everybody. At CenterCode, when we did managed services, we'd run tests for companies. We'd think of a best practice. One of the best practices we had was to call every single tester. So we'd have one of our test managers or a coordinator pick up the phone and dial testers. And not just once, they needed to get in contact with them. So they'd call testers and say, hey, I'm so-and-so from CenterCode, and I'm running this test on behalf of, whatever the company is. They'd establish some kind of rapport, some relationship, get to know them a little bit better. Then they would remind the testers of the confidentiality agreement, saying like, hey, by the way, you're under confidentiality. Please don't say anything about the product to other people outside of the test. And then we talk about things like the requirements for participating. Here's what you can expect from week to week. And that was good, right? It's a best practice. Now, you only get to that point as if you have a resources available for that. So I wouldn't recommend, and you guys probably laugh at me if I did recommend, call up your testers and let them know what's going to go on the test. Now, it could totally work for some of you that are at that point and you're looking for adjusting and optimizing your program. But if you're not at that point, if you don't have testers, why would I tell you to call them, right? So like, that's what I'm trying to get in this webinar is there's the right way to do, or there's a right practice versus a best practice that applies to everybody. So I'm going to talk about this in a little more depth as we get through the webinar. But the concept really applies to, depending on where you are, there are going to be certain strategies that are going to be better. They're going to work better for you. There's things that apply across the board. So I'm going to talk about this. And that's what really what I mean by the blueprint when I'm talking here is there's a blueprint. There's, the basics of here's what we need to be able to do. Like you need to have a sign-up page, for example, or a way for them to get into a project. You need to have messaging and a strategy around that messaging. Now that applies. Now there's different priorities in each of those things based on where you are. And I kind of set up this really funky scale because I don't want to call it like a really nice scale because it's not like opposite ends. But there's companies that are like, oh man, I can't find testers at all. Like I just can't find anybody to join. So I call the Where's Waldo. Then there's people that have a little bit of testers, they have their mom and pa on the test. They have friends and family, and there's some people in there, people that have a good amount of testers. So they've got a nice chunk, a nice crew of people, but they'd like some more. Or they need some better, or they need something in that. And then there's I need more diversity. So I see this a lot in the bigger organizations. So when people say like, I do have recruitment problems, I need to recruit for a market that I've never been in, which kind of reassesses. So it's like a big enterprise or modern tech firm that wants to get into say Brazil or into China or something like that, and they don't have a base there, so they're new in there. They don't have like a lot of credibility in that, so they can have problems in that front. But a lot of times for the consulting that I saw was, I want more out of my testers. I want more data. I want better data. I want faster information. So what I'm going to cover in here is there's strategies that we can apply to make sure that we kind of hit almost all of these things. So as I mentioned, I have a few things that I'm going to cover in terms of like the overall blueprint, which I have here in number 2. The first thing, why are we having problems with finding testers? The second thing, that blueprint, right now it's just the blueprint's very basic. We do have a kit coming out. I think it's already released. You can visit centercode.com/resources. We have a blueprint for recruitment that's actually like, we call it a builder's guide. It's a guide with some screenshots and some call outs on here's stuff that you can build. And then just some lessons and failures from some things that I've learned. And I might have messed this up in my ordering as we get further along, but this is what we're going to be covering. So first, why do I have problems? If you're saying this, why do I have problems finding testers? Now, when I was talking about Product Hunt, a lot of those people don't have one big thing. They don't have any credibility. So like a best practice for recruitment is to include branding, right? To include branding, because the branding and your logos and stuff it establishes trust and credibility. But what happens if your brand has no trust or credibility? Is branding a best practice, right? So I think it is. Whether or not they see it or not, what it does is at least say that it's not sketchy. So like the worst thing that I've seen is someone says, "Hey, I'm launching a beta test," and they link off to a Google form or some kind of free survey tool that just asks for information immediately and that doesn't establish anything. It's like, no, that's why you're not getting any testers. You're asking people to get information and they don't trust you. Why would they give you information? So a lot of the problems that I see in startups and people in bigger companies trying to get into new markets is establishing that credibility where it may not be this. So this is one of the things that's leading into a challenge with recruitment. Another thing is the attraction why. This is a lot of the justification of why would someone want to be a tester. So you could be getting visits or traffic to things like your sign up pages or impressions on posts. Or you could get open rates on emails, depending on your strategy for sources of going out to testers, but you're not getting a lot of conversion. A lot of the problem comes from a level of attraction. You need to be able to express why they should be joining. So if you don't have the key elements of attraction of what's useful, like even the most unattractive products theoretically have some level of attraction. We just did our podcast with Alex Larson. I love this. Not to say that his product or their software is not attractive by any means, but it's got like fleet management analytics tools for like trucking business, right? Now it's not the craziest attraction level. It's not going to get a lot of people that are not in trucking, but for trucking, it's like, okay, why would they care? And there's a level of something. There's something you need to communicate about why they should join that can tip you over to, oh yeah, I'm going to start getting testers because of that thing, right? Testers will, or applicants or people going to the test will catch on what's attractive. Why would they join? The next thing I have in here is the wrong process at the wrong time. And it's really that and I have this as one of the lessons. So I'll rephrase it a little bit. You could be using the wrong strategy for the wrong problem. So if you've already established that you have testers and you just kind of like you're skating by, you're assuming everything's cool, and then you need to go after something that's a little bit different. So like you want to get into a new market, but you're like, oh, I'm a big company. What's the problem? I'm going to throw it out there. This has worked for my other recruitments. Why would I have a problem? And then you get nothing back. And it's because you're applying a strategy that may not be necessarily fit for this, certain occasion. The same can go for startups. Startups can pull another strategy that doesn't necessarily work. The last thing I have on here is the tools you're using. I mentioned that Google form earlier. Now, Google Forms aren't the worst thing. You can definitely collect sign-up information, but it's like very important to understand like that's not necessarily where people are going to be communicating from inside a tester's communicating with you on, unless you're going to keep sending out Google Forms. But there's something about that credibility and trust and easy use and intuitiveness that tools can apply that really ease the friction required from testers. And we talk about it at Center Code a lot. There's like this healthy friction in recruitments, and there's good times for friction and bad times for friction. There's also, like I mentioned, if you're not having a lot of a good time finding testers, you can't find them, I wouldn't be applying a lot of friction to things. I would be aiming for a slightly lower bar. But if I'm having too many people, I'm going to apply some healthy friction early on. That way I can ensure that I'm going to get much better data on the back end. So here's what I see is probably not a fully comprehensive list, but here's where I see a lot of the problems for recruitment happening. It's in these 4 components. And when I talk about this blueprint, things that kind of apply, I'm going to rattle off a couple of concepts, ideas, things that you should think about of applying to almost every single one of your recruitments. Your strategy. It's all part of some kind of plan that you're building. You need to sit down and come up with a strategy that's going to work for that audience and run it through your head and test it out, make sure that it's going to work, at least in your head. And then then try to get on the paper, and I have here on the third one, iterate. So if it doesn't work, change your strategy, but give it time to get some information back. So start with your strategy. Your messaging is the key component to all of this. So it's your strategy communicated is the message. You're iterating on the message. You're keeping or optimizing based on that single the message that's going out. So know who your audience is. That's the biggest advice I have for anybody doing recruitment. Use their language, use their jargon if you need be, but you're talking to somebody and you need to communicate. It's a ring true to them. So you want them to sign up. Iterate. So make sure that you do modify based on feedback that you get from testers. So if you do get a couple testers and you want to ask them how it worked or how well it went, or I'm talking about the recruitment stage of it, and you should do it later for testing as well, but just for specifically for this recruitment, you want to change that process a little. One of my favorite things to do, this is something I learned from user research. So I would build a lot of surveys back in the day. I guess I still do surveys, but I'd build out a survey. And one of the survey techniques that I learned is write out your survey, print it out, or write it down, write out your survey, whatever it is, and then walk up to somebody in the office. And this is when we were in the office, maybe call someone or Slack someone, say, hey, hop on a huddle real quick, or let's do a call, and read the survey question, and read the answers. And just that part of the survey building process ensured I wasn't going to say anything that wasn't misunderstood or it didn't sound right when it came out. So I'd get feedback in real time from the person answering it, and I've also listened to myself speaking it. The same goes for a recruitment. If you want to just get your message and then run it over to somebody and say, hey, I'm trying to get someone to sign up for a beta test. Here's what I'm saying to them. And they're like, oh, that sounds confusing, right? Or what do you mean by this? Like when they say, what do you mean? Or what do you like? Can you talk about that a little more? That's a key indicator that you need to change that message or modify it slightly. Maybe didn't go crazy and change everything. Maybe go to another person and kind of verify, but run it through, test out that messaging before it's going to go out. And then if you do get feedback, make sure you're improving it. Don't forget what works. This is, I talked about this before, saying not every process applies, and just because a strategy worked in the past doesn't mean it's going to work in the future. But you still need to understand what works for what strategies. This is like kind of how you set up a structure for each strategy, because you could eventually use that strategy again, right? Whether or not you're going to a new company, or whether or not you got a new product line that's going to have to go through that same thing, and you're going to need to do a beta test on it. Just identify what is going to work. You're going to need to keep using it in the future at some point, whether or not it's this company or another, but it's hard to get away from beta testing. Every product has to kind of go through these phases and get feedback. So you having that experience on what works and what doesn't is going to be really, really crucial. So I mentioned I messed up the order, so there should be like more explanation of those blueprints, and I'm going to cover it, but I'm going to start off with some lessons, things that I've learned. And this is funny because it's things that I've heard people say over time. And the first one was someone's like, oh man, but a little bit of confusion is kind of, cool, right? It's edgy. Someone's going to want to do that. I don't think most people have this luxury to think of the mystery of their beta tests as being something that could, generate a lot of conversion into signups. So what I'd say is try not to be mysterious. Don't like, oh, something's cool coming, sign up now. Like that's, if you have a really big brand and you can get by, more power to you, but I wouldn't really test it, because I don't think the benefits outweigh the risk in that. You can just waste a bunch of time creating that cool thing that you think is going to work. So try not to be mysterious. It doesn't typically work super well. Be clear about who your product is for. This is kind of, I call it later, it's like your ideal tester profile. What someone that you want to be on this test, what do they look like? What do they do? So if you're testing, I don't know, I've a toddler, and I'm trying to put them to sleep when I'm thinking about this, a noise machine is super cool, right? Like being able to talk like, oh, up late at night trying to get your kids to go to sleep, or worried that every noise you're going to make is going to wake them up, we've got a cool new product coming out that we'd love your feedback on. Like, that's an enticing message to someone that really resonates with me specifically. But think about your product, think about your market. Why are they using that product? What's the fit there? And be able to use that to generate more people coming into your project. And try not assuming that every strategy, I mentioned this also is going to be repeated, but try not assuming every strategy works for every problem you're trying to solve. I've probably already nailed that into you enough. But let's get into some of these blueprint elements that I want to talk about here. The first one has to do with the messaging going out. So there's a couple of, and I'm just talking about 3 in this webinar. You have things that you can use that's like an email invitation. If you have a list of users, if you have customers, if you've gotten a list of emails, an email invitation is one of the things that you could use to attract people to sign up to your project. And here's just kind of like an outline of things you want to make sure you include. And again, this is going to vary. This is like the most important part of this is, yes, email invitations, or yes, social post, and the last one is sign up pages, the landing pages for your site. Yes, you should have all these things, but some companies need to emphasize certain other things over others. Like, for example, I'd be very clear about the benefits of joining the test if you don't have credibility to stand on, and or you have a difficult time finding people because your audience is very niche. Now, what I'm talking about specifically is B2B. If you're doing B2B products, a lot of times it's hard to attract people because it's, oh, I'm paying for the product. I don't want to have to do more. But Alex said it perfect on the podcast. If you get to check out his episode, one of the things that he uses as a key strategy for recruiting people into a project is explaining the benefits of access to this new technology, access to this new feature. Now, these are customers that he's dealing with. He's dealing with customers, he's recruiting them, and he still has a hard time finding them, right? So it's not exclusive to startups. It's bigger companies that have to deal with very expensive software. But what he uses is he explains a benefit as a competitive edge. So he actually learned this by talking with a tester, and he asked the tester, would you recommend this product to anybody, like to a friend or anything like that? It's just like a net promoter score. And the person said no. And he was so intrigued by that. And I love the story. I'm stealing it from him. He was so intrigued by that. He gets on and talks to them like, why did you say you wouldn't recommend it? It doesn't seem like you've indicated you have any feedback that's negative. He's like, why would I tell someone else about this? I want to keep this for myself. He's treating the advantage of using this beta test of the software, these features that he got access to, as a competitive advantage above his competition. Like, he got access to new features that got him faster or better analytics that he can tune and optimize maybe their truck routes. But when you don't have a lot of attraction in your test, you need to build it. So what is attractive to your audience? And that's know your audience a little bit. So know who your audience is and communicate to them. So I'm highlighting those ones for the people that have struggles getting the right people. And this is going to apply to social posts. It's going to apply to wherever you're putting your posts. So there's some of these are like redundant between each of the mediums that you're going to use. So I'll use mediums loosely. But email invitation, just a clear subject line. I always like to explain who's running it. I think the personal aspect of beta testing is so big. So if you're a product manager, one of the key benefits of as a tester of you joining the test is being able to talk with the company. Like, it's, some I like to say this as, like, when you're a beta tester, sometimes you get like the access to be a tastemaker. It's exclusive access to a product before it goes like viral, before everyone knows about it. One of the big millennials thing is like, I did that before this was cool, right? Like, it's total hipster thing, right? You found something before it was cool. I got to beta test that before it was cool, before it was trendy. And part of that's one of the more benefits, but part of the benefits is being able to access people. It's like, oh yeah, I know someone at that company, right? And now they can, name drop. Not that everyone's going to be notable inside of a company like that, but explain the purpose of the testing. This is, a famous thing from Simon Sinek, the person who talks about start with why. Always introduce why you're testing, what you're interested in learning. It communicates a level of vulnerability to your users about what you're trying to get from them. It also narrows down what they should be looking at if they do sign up for your test. So if you're looking for things like bugs, or if you're looking for things like, I'm just looking to see how I can improve the UI, or I'm looking for feature gaps, if I have anything there, if I want to find all those things, communicate to that testers before they are testers. And you want to communicate this through the way. So in that guide, we talk about the onboarding steps and how this message kind of starts with the initial awareness piece, and it kind of follows the testers through their entire experience. Include those benefits of testing, list some project details. Like, I'm not saying you don't have to drop every single feature that you're testing, but a basic timeline. Hey, we're looking, for the next, couple weeks, or starting on this point if you don't have an end date in mind, or we're aimed to start at this date. Like, give some loose ideas, and also some expectations is good of what you can expect to see on a test. We do weekly, test sprints or activities. And then a clear call to action. This is stupid obvious, but you need to have clear action for them to go to. What do you want them to do from this email? Sign up on this page, go download a version of the software, the app, whatever it is. So communicate that clearly, have it called out, and attention given to it. Your social invitation, for those people that are using social as a means, there's a lot of followings and face groups and or Facebooks and LinkedIn's, and people do tweet about beta all the time. I don't know if Elon talks about the full self-driving vehicles beta. I think that's like a very, very common beta social explanation. But get the attention with just a catchy headline. Lead again with the benefits. This one you're going to have to be much more concise because you don't have a lot of room. Your email, you don't want to be very extensive, but you can be a little bit more verbose. Use some visualization. If you don't have some visualizations on social, you could just be kind of falling flat for the most part. You need something just to catch their eye so they read the rest of it. Again, very basic project details, and then again, a clear call to action, some kind of link that sends them to a sign up page. If you have a free Center Code account, you can send them to a sign up page. The next thing is the sign up page itself. So where you're pushing people to, where they're going to get access into the project, all the project details. Again, start with something clear and concise about this is a beta invitation for this kind of product. Your reason for running the tests. Always, the benefits are kind of key, no matter what level of maturity you are or how big your business is. Benefits are key. Just a little more key in some cases, where I would kind of lean into them more if I don't have things like credibility or access. And communicate the requirements for your testing, especially on the sign up page, what it takes to be a tester, what you'd expect. Set those expectations early. Make sure you elaborate a little bit on the timeline. Give them some dates to work through. You want to make sure that if they're applying, they can test. There's nothing worse than trying to get people to sign up to a test, and it's 4 months away, and they may not be interested at that point, or it's over a holiday weekend, or there's a lot of holidays in the US, but make sure you have access to a privacy policy. This is really important. A lot of people, especially people that have concerns with security, want to feel safer, and just having a link to a privacy policy, not that anybody reads those in depth, it's just a little makes them feel a little safe and warm and fuzzy on the inside by including some kind of privacy policy. It could just be a link at the bottom. And then your call to action, which could be, you could either have them jump straight into a project and view some activities, or you can have them download something like the beta app or software. You can also have them go to a screener survey. If you are screening surveys, I don't recommend people screen if they're having the hardest time finding testers. It's a very good practice to make sure you're not bringing in people that just aren't going to use it, or aren't the right fit, or it's just going to cause a mess. So if you are going to use a screener, make sure it's smaller, If you do have a lot of credibility and you have too many testers coming through, use your screener as a way to apply friction and weed out the people that are not going to be good testers. This is just kind of like a recap of each one of those things, so you can take a screenshot of this if you'd like. We also send it out in the deck. But just talking about these 3 key components of your recruitment. And again, these are kind of covered in the guide. We also have a email generator, which is kind of cool on CenterCode. So if you can Google beta invite template or generator. I think we rank pretty high on that one. But you can visit that, and it can actually generate email invites for you, but also breaks down the component, every single message inside your recruitment messages for your email, and it kind of explains what the best practices are or the right practices are. So check those out. A lot of great resources on centercode.com. So I want to do a quick recap. I know we just hit just a little bit over 30 minutes. So I'm going to leave some room for some questions and answers. Recap. Recruitment can be simple and it can be complex. It really depends on your situation, but I hope I broke down some levels of where you can see. Doesn't even matter where you are, but there's like these messages and strategy components that apply to anybody. Just how you manipulate them for your situation is kind of what makes them really useful to you. There are patterns for everyone in a situation. That's what I was saying. This is kind of like a blueprint. Messaging is different at different stages. When I talk about awareness, it's trying to get people attention, attract them to your site. Converting them is getting them into a project, getting their information available so you can get them the product, or it's getting them to sign up. And activation is from that point on of signing up, starting to test, activating them into the test, getting them available. When I talk about messaging being important at each of these stages, when I talk about requirements or expectations, you want to set expectations all the way through your test, all the way to the end of the test. You want to remind. That's how you kind of maximize your engagement. Not a lot of people think of that maximizing engagement as being a recruitment thing, which is one of those you have to be a little more mature to experience that problem. But you get way more engagement or a lot more data out of finding good testers and explaining what you want from them at a lot of different stages. So no one's sitting there as a tester thinking, what do I need to do? What do you want from me? It's very clear about what you expect. And think about these things that I've just talked about as strategies you can apply based on your situation. So think about where you are, what problem you're having in recruitment. Put your toddler to sleep if you want to use that. Get in your dojo. Think about, what am I trying to solve with this recruitment and why am I having problems with it? You may not know initially, but just kind of go through the thought exercise. If I'm having trouble getting to that new region, why? Do they not know who the company is? Oh, I don't have credibility. I don't have trust in that market, right? Sometimes you have to use a different strategy. One of my favorite strategies is word of mouth. Word of mouth and using referral systems is really important if you have a real hard time finding a niche market. We always tell this story about, I'm going to totally overuse the story because I've said it on a lot of podcasts too. We were looking for a small workout shirt in Canada with an Android market that needed to work out multiple times a week. So it's very limited base of people. And how we got that recruitment, or how we were successful in that recruitment, is word of mouth. We found a couple, and our message outreach explained that, hey, we really need to find people like you. Can you help us, reach the numbers that we need? Can you help us reach out to the people similar to you? Like minds tend to gather. Join the community for another plug. But that strategy can apply to your situation. So really think, why am I having problems? What am I trying to do with the recruitment? How can I improve this? And use these components, this blueprint, as a way to get over the finish line with your recruitments. I mentioned this earlier. Download the How to Find and Onboard Testers. It's got a lot of things about components of successful messaging. There's some illustrations in there, some like infographic stuff, and there's tips along the way for each of those stages, nicely outlined for everyone to get access to. If you don't have a free account, or if you're not a customer, signup.centercode.com. That's going to give you access to create your free instance of the beta edition. If you want to look at the features that are available on there, check out the pricing page on centercode.com/resources for anything that you need. We have a lot of guides. We have a lot of ebooks and kits and everything that you can imagine in terms of the world of beta testing. So check that out. Now I want to open up to any Q&A. Right now I don't see any in there, so I'm going to leave it open for a little bit. If you guys have any questions or comments or anything that you'd like to discuss, I'm open to it. If you don't feel comfortable asking questions in this format, feel free to reach out to me on Chris@centercode.com. Happy to take any of those questions. If nothing, I see Alex Larson on here. Hey, how's it going, Alex? All right. With no questions coming in, I'd like to give you guys some time back. I appreciate you joining the webinar. I will catch you all later. You guys have a good day.